Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is Liege in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 81, A Peaceful World. He can feel his heart stopping as warm liquid splashed on his face, and he was sure his whole world have stopped as soon as he saw the source of that red and warm liquid that is currently painting his face in splotches of its essence. No, 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 no. He screamed as he reached out to figure before, trying to reach them and make sure that they are all right, only for some unknown forces tear him away from them, and he watched hopelessly as the figure falls limply. No. Let me go. I have to make sure that she is all right. He screamed as he struggled against the invisible hands that is carrying him away and further away from the figure that saved his life. No. He screamed as he abruptly sat up. What? He muttered as he felt the softness of his mattress. Where am I? He muttered as he looked around. It appears like he is in a room. But, he said before a wave of pain assaulted his head, making him groan in pain as the images in his mind started to blur. Caleb. A woman's voice called out. Caleb? Who in the world is Caleb? You okay there, my boy? The woman asked. He didn't say anything as he waited for the woman to come inside his room. Sweetheart. The woman called out as she opened the door, revealing a woman with striking blue eyes and dark hair. Who? He muttered under his breath. The woman giggled as her features softened and her eyes glowed in that motherly affectionate light. Are you still asleep, sleepyhead? She asked as she pinched his cheek. Wake up or your father would be very annoyed if you are late for work, she said with a giggle. Father? He asked in confusion. Yes, young man. The woman said, your father is waiting for you and he need your help with the fields, she said. It's harvest time and we need to prepare for the long winter. The woman said happily. All right, he said. Bad dream, my tart? The woman asked as she run her hand through his hair. Why yes, he said as he tried to erase the memory of that limp and bloodied figure from his dream. Want to talk about it? The woman asked. No need to worry about it, he said. I'll probably be forgetting about it soon enough, he said with a shrug of his shoulders. If you say so, the woman said before she stood up. Get ready and come down for breakfast or it will be cold, she said. Of course, he said as he finally got his bearing. Mum, he said. His mother merely smiled before she turned and leave him to get ready for the day. A splash of cool water is enough to wake him. However, the dream from earlier still bothered him, seeing the limp figure on the ground as he felt their warm blood on his face. He lifted his face and looked towards the mirror. Greenish blue eyes blinked back at him and his raven hair still tousled from sleep, and he instantly felt unsettled. Why would someone be unsettled by their own appearance? He groaned in frustration as he failed to understand the reason of the unease and scratched his head, further messing his hair in the process. Well, nothing to be done now, he said. Hope this feeling goes away and everything is fine and dandy again, he said as he slapped his cheeks to wake himself up. Stayed up all night again, my boy? A burly man asked. Been seeing that city lassie? The man asked with a teasing smile. No, he said as he poked at his breakfast sausage. I was training with this night, he said. Sir Geralt? The man asked. Yes, he said as his head started aching again. He is a good teacher and a good warrior, he said before he took a piece of his breakfast and shoved it into his mouth. Holding a sword and a spear as well as teaching you the basic of reading and writing, his mother said. Are you planning on becoming a knight, my tart? She asked. Not necessarily, but knowing how to read and write is a plus, as well as having a knowledge on how to wield a weapon other than the rake and shovel is quite handy in the future, he said after swallowing her food. And who knows, I might want to be a knight someday, if opportunity will have it, he said with a shrug of his shoulders. If that is the case then, why not, his father said with a shrug of his shoulders. Well, we should be going out and about on the fields, he said. We are running out of daylight, old man, he said. His father laughed heartily. That's the spirit, he said. He wiped the sweat off his forehead after he dropped the sack of wheat on the ground of their mill. "I think that's about it," he muttered as he checked if all of the sacks are all accounted for. "Hard at work as usual, eh?" Woman's voice said behind him. "And what are you doing here?" he asked as he turned to face the city lass his father have been talking about. "Came to get you," the woman said as she approached him. "Fa Geralt is waiting for you," she says that he isn't getting any younger," the woman said. "Gimme me a break," he said as he slumped down on the sack of wheat. "I was working," he said. "Those crops won't be harvesting themselves, you know," he said. "That you are right," the woman said as she sat down beside him and handed him a can of water. He thanked her for her consideration. A comfortable silence have enveloped them, weirdly enough. Sitting beside this woman he have only known for a short amount of time is comfortable, he muttered. "Yes?" the woman asked as her indigo eyes looked to him. "Nothing," he said as he felt a void in his heart as soon as he saw her eyes. Something about her indigo hues made something inside him ache, long but he can't quite understand it. He felt like he knows her, lived by her side and swore by her. Something is wrong. Why do I feel this way? He thought. "Say, Caleb," the woman said. Even the way she says his name bothered him. That name coming out of her mouth felt wrong. It made him uneasy. "Yes?" he asked, ignoring the unease that is starting to settle in his chest. "When me and Geralt leave," the woman said as she started to fidget. "Can I write to you?" she asked shyly. "Of course," he said, "though I was only a beginner when it comes to literatures and the arts, but I'll do my best to be able to write to you," he said with a sheepish smile. "With a lot of practice, you will get better," the woman said. "I hope so," he said as he stretched his arms. "Well, I better go meet Geralt or he might beat me until I'm blue and black all over," he said. "Come now," the woman said with a soft giggle. "He have taken a liking towards you," she said. "You are kidding me, right?" he said in shock. "I'm not," the woman said as he stood up. "If that's the case then, Captain sure have a weird way of showing affection," he said. "Well, he did give the Archbishop a dagger with a ring attached to it," the woman said as she touched the dagger tied on the belt around her hips. "That's quite weird," he said, trying not to sound rude. "In Faergus, a dagger usually meant, 'I love you, go out with me,' and a ring attached to one or a sword essentially meant, 'I'll give you my name and put a baby in you,' or 'put a baby in me, mister,'" she said. "That's an unusual way to propose," he said as he blinked in surprise. "Faergon are a different breed," he said with a shrug. "Yeah, but I bet Lester have something similar too," the woman said. "We most certainly," he said as he starts to remember to the antler that was displayed in his house or the bow his mother have given his father back when they are courting do, he said as his shoulders slumped down. "See," the woman said. "So, you have no right to call Geralt weird for giving the Archbishop a dagger and a ring," she said. "I guess I can't," he said. "You are improving, boy," Geralt said as he relaxed his stance. "Glad to see that the hours of beating you black and blue all over is what you defined as enjoyable," he said. "I don't," he said as he relaxes his stance. "Well, I can understand why," Geralt said with a shrug of his shoulders. "When the kid over there is taking care of you every time you get a bruise," Geralt said as he pointed towards the woman watching them train. "Well, he might as well be your squire," the woman said as she stood up. "And why would I do that?" Geralt asked. "He is a good student and he have the potential to be a great addition to the Knight of Siros," she said as reached out to touch his cheek before he felt a gentle flow of healing magic. "Don't you think so too?" the woman asked Geralt. "I guess it can happen," Geralt said with a scratch of his head. At the mention of the Knight of Siros, a wave of pain assaulted his brain. Flashes of him kneeling before a white-clad figure appeared in his mind. Memories of someone's soft and warm hands holding his own become even more vivid as he started to feel the warm comfort those hands, those beloved and dear hands brought to him. You okay? The woman asked in concern. He is about to say something when reality started to glitch and the woman's hair color is starting to change to green. He groaned in pain as he tried to reel in the pain as the world around him started to change. Reality blinked and he found himself eye to eye with a room darker than the blackest of nights before it reverted back to the field together with Geralt and his daughter before back again. A figure clad in a priestess clothes got on her feet and tapped her staff on the ground, making the whole place tremble. Calm yourself. What? This reality is the one you have desired for so long, is it not? A warm home, a family, a place to call his own. Yes, he wanted them for so very long to the point that every time he lost one, it only numbed him to the world and he realized that if he didn't get attached to someone then, he would not get hurt, he would not cry, he would not mourn. It's much easier to say goodbye and move on to the next when there is no strings attached to his heart, and he have done a good job until recently, until he meet. Yes, and this is the realization of that dream. A peaceful world where you don't have to see bloodshed, feel the pain of losing someone, and fight countless battles until your days are done. A place where you won't be afraid to give your heart to someone you know won't leave your side no matter what the world says. Someone, he just wanted someone to stay with him, someone that won't leave him, won't die on him, someone, he just wants someone to stay. And you will have it, in this world of peace and prosperity where the world will never know pain, never know death, never know loss, a world you so desired. As he felt his heart calming down and he is starting to fall into the flow of normalcy. Shay, don't. Come back to me. A desperate voice called out to him, begging him for something he doesn't know. A voice so familiar and so dear to him, but the darkness is closing in and with that he have come back once more. To that peaceful reality. You okay? The woman asked as she rubs his back. He looked at her into her mesmerizing and beautiful eyes. Yes, he said as he forced a smile. Everything all right, he said as the pain in his head subsided. Chapter 82, A Night of Fighting I. She can feel her heart beating 1,000 miles an hour as they neared Alquam. Wait. For me, she thought as she feels her heart racing even faster in anticipation of being to see him again and the thought of the oncoming fight. There they are, Claude said as he looked at the thousands and thousands of army spread across the plain as far as the eyes can see before he whistled to himself. Maybe we are too drastic to let Teach handle whatever is inside that floaty continent thing, he said as he looked up the floating continent. It is not, Dimitri said as he continued look forward. We cannot rely on her forever, he said as he gripped Gungnir tightly. If we are going to prove to her that we are worthy of her trust, then we fight this battle by our own strength, he said, because she entrusted it to us and now we will prove that we are worthy of her trust. He exclaimed, his voice resounding across the plain. Every soldier, every knight have heard him and they have cheered in response. They too wanted to tell the archbishop that have labored for the sake of their future, to change Fodlan for the better, to leave this to them while she can fight with everything she have, without worry or doubt. I'm glad everyone love her, Claude said, which meant that we can't back down now, he said. We'll just have to show Teach that we too are reliable and we can't let her down now. She trusts us to work together and to see this through, Claude said as he draws an arrow and aim his bow towards the army. We will fight and we will succeed, Dimitri said as he aimed his lance towards the army. Claude chuckled at this. Right. You are, your kingliness, he said. It seems like we are in for a hell of fight, Claude said. Better stay alive until the dawn have arrived, Claude, Dimitri said. Claude merely smiled and both of the men fired their weapon, signaling the beginning of the long and grueling battle. They dodged a huge ball of miasma as it came barreling down on them. Greetings, a deep voice said. You guys are late, he said as he came into view. It is quite rude, the man said. Metamorphic slaughterer, Seath muttered under his breath. To think that he is the first one to greet us, he said. She gritted her teeth as she clenched her fist. She doesn't have time for this, she have to go and take Shay back. You three go on ahead, Seath said. I'll take care of Heracles, he said. No. Flame said. Flane, Seath said in a scolding and pleading tone. No, I'm not leaving you to fight him alone, Flane said. Not when he is one of the reason why mother died years ago, she said. Ah, right, Heracles said with a grin. I quite remember having a exquisite duel with your mother, he said as he looked at his reflection on the blade of her spear. A great fighter that won, gave me a hell of a time with her skill with the spear, he said as he took out a spear from out of nowhere. Hardly fair that Chi-Chi will be the only one fighting though, Heracles said as he tossed the ornate spear towards Flane. Let's see how much Lady Alida managed to teach you, Seathlin, Heracles said. Be it magic or the spear, he said. Father, Flane said as she managed to recognize the spear in her hands. This is, she said. I was wondering where did this spear went to, Seath said. I took it as a keepsake, Heracles said. In respect for the greatest spear wielder I have the honor of having a duel to the death, he said with a chuckle. Too bad she ain't good not to kill me, Heracles said darkly. You, Seath hissed as he clenched his fist around his own weapon. Heracles gave an amused scoff. Well, you wanted to avenge your late wife, Heracles said as a wide and manic grin appeared on his face. Come at me, he exclaimed. Sickle, he roared as his teeth transformed into fangs. Father, Flane said as she went into the stance she is so familiar with and one she is famous with, a stance she developed in order to break through any weapon, a stance her mother have ingrained into her whole being, the Wind Dragon stance. Please, let me join you, let me fight by you, Flane said. Seath heaved a heavy sigh. If you wish to, but be careful, he said. My little hope, Seathlin, he said. Of course, Father, Flane said as she looked towards Heracles. I won't die, I won't leave you again, she said. Seath nodded. Done saying your dues yet, Chi-Chi? Heracles asked. If so, he said as he readied his weapon. Let's begin, Heracles said as he charged towards father and daughter. Seath readied himself and his wyvern before he dashed towards Heracles while both Byleth and Rhea flew past them and towards the palace of Shamhala. Bring it, he said. Heracles Seath roared as he prepared to receive Heracles' weapon. Dimitri's lance clashed with the imitation of Ariathar. Not bad, Bladdid said in delight as a bloodthirsty smile appeared on his face. But a watered-down version of my might is nothing against the original, he said as the major crest of Bladdid appeared before him, shining brightly than his, while Bladdid pushed him back, sending him a couple of meters away from him before his face met with Bladdid's fist. Dimitri was taken out of the loop for a second before he charged on ahead as the minor crest of Bladdid appeared before him, and he can feel a boost of power flow down his vein while his shield connected with Bladdid's body, pushing a few meters away from where they are fighting before he throw him to the ground with a resounding thud before he begun beating on his own ancestor's face with the butt of Gungnir, and he would continue to pound his face to ground if it wasn't for the fact that crest of Bladdid shine again and Bladdid catched the spear mid-stomp. How fun, Bladdid said with a soft laugh while he struggled to overpower the undead man. How fucking fun, he said as the crest of Bladdid appeared once more before he yanked the Gungnir out his hand and tossed it to the side. Show me more, your majesty, Bladdid hissed as he grabs his face before he practically shove him on his back by pushing his head to the ground. The ground beneath him cracked upon impact. Show me that your strength haven't waned since becoming a king, he said in a bout of his bloodthirst as he threw the imitation Ariathar aside. Let's settle this with our fist like true men of the north, Bladdid said as he prepare himself for a brawl. No weapon and no magic, he exclaimed in ecstasy. Dimitri's griffin descended beside him and he deposits his weapon on the holster on its saddle before it flew off again. All right, he said as he prepare himself to brawl with his own ancestor. That's more like it, Bladdid exclaimed before he charges towards Dimitri. Dimitri followed suit and charges towards his ancestor, their fist connecting on their faces. Wild beast and fallen beast run through the fields as Ferdinand's lance smite those who dared come close to him and his beloved. Marianne! Ferdinand! Exclaimed as Marianne took out a flute. Give me a moment, Ferdinand, Marianne said. I know a tune that will enchant them, she said before she started to play the first note of the song called Dance of the Beast. From the instant the first note was released from the flute, the beasts suddenly stopped dead in their tracks as though they have just entered a trance before Marianne changed the tone of the song, and the beasts suddenly turn towards the opposite side and charges towards their ranks, wreaking havoc into their formation. That flute is magnificent, Ferdinand said as he navigated through the battlefield. Who gave her the piper's flute? Dolophonus exclaimed in surprise as Marianne kept playing the tune before he come charging towards them. Ferdinand parried the sword of the assassin with his lance. You do know that it's rude to interrupt a lady when she is playing a lovely tune, he said as he pushed Dolophonus away from him with a push of his lance as the minor crest of Sikal shone brightly, paralyzing Dolophonus instantly before Ferdinand charged towards the assassin with his lance ready to pierce his heart. Linhard put up a force field around him and Lysynthia as he waited for Lysynthia to finish setting up the holy weapon that was bestowed upon her by the archbishop, a holy weapon that was forged by the great master blacksmith, Kilane, though its powers is yet to be known. Can you hurry it up, Lysynthia? Linhard asked as he tried to keep the shield up as the imitation of the sword Thunderbrand repeatedly hit the barrier with the exact precision of the thunder. I'm trying. Lysynthia exclaimed just as the crest of Karen resonated with the weapon, making Lysynthia laugh as the small box started to turn. So, you are ready to fight like a warrior, huh? Karen asked as he entered a stance. Hopefully, this is a fair fight, Linhard said as a golem made of lightning and stones started to rise up the ground. Ready when you are, Lysynthia said as the veins on the golem started to glow with magic. Come at me, Karen, she said. Karen just laugh. How fun, he said as started charging towards the pair, cutting apart each magic Linhard throws his way before the power of Thunderbrand was unleashed. Its glowing dark blade started to get covered by crimson lightning as he guarded against the lightning fist of the golem. Get out of my way, Lysynthia said as she released a fire magic from the golem's hand. Sylvain swirled his lance as soon as he performed a parry before he slammed the lance on the ground, making it crack upon impact before making an explosion, causing the demise of several undead soldiers around him. Gotta say, Sylvain muttered as he took the lance out of the ground before whistling for his horse, these weapons are even handier than those damn heroes' relic. He said as he mounted on his running horse, I feel like I can fight for days. He said as he parried another spell before he sent it back with a swirl of his lance in the golden light of the saint. An arrow whizzed past his ears and into heart of the enemy before he heard Mercedes riding beside him and firing another shot towards the enemy. When did you learn how to do that? Sylvain asked impressed. A great teacher taught me how to, Mercedes said before she fired an aspirita towards a mage, weakening the thing. Professor? Sylvain asked. Mercedes shakes her head. A certain night, she said. Sylvain finished the mage as they passed by and towards the figure wreaking havoc with imitation of the Lance of Ruin, a Omni-Mouse crimson tornado throwing and killing his men. Get ready, Mercedes, Sylvain said. Mercedes loaded another arrow into her arrow. I have your back, she said as she let the arrow loose before it meet with a fire magic. They landed in front of a huge door which she guessed is the entrance of Alquam. Are you ready, child? Rhea asked as she reverted back to her human form. Yes, she said as her heart beat in worry and anticipation of finally seeing him and having him safe by her side once more. Let's proceed, she said. Before we go, Rhea said, I hope that your mind have changed in regards of the container's fate, she said. You already know the answer to that, Rhea, she said. Rhea closed her eyes and took a deep breath. I hope our trip towards the container can enlighten your mind, she said. She didn't say anything as she raised the sword of Ceros while white fire swirled around the blade, doubling its size. We'll see, she said as she released a stream of fire towards the mahogany door, effectively burning it. They are late, Celis said with a grin as he felt Suthies, the archbishop's and Ciro's presence entering the premises of the palace, and here I thought that Heracles will be fighting in an unfair fight, he said as he prepared a contraption. Chapter 83, A Night of Fighting 2. As they navigated through the palace, she can't help but admire the scenery before her. The whole palace is cloaked with the eternal night sky, the galaxies, and the stars before her very eyes. Sothis hummed thoughtfully. Still, she said, as beautiful as ever, Sothis said. If this place isn't the enemy's headquarters, Shay would have loved this place, she muttered as she looked up to the ceiling where the eternal night sky is, since he seems to love the sky, she said, be it by the light of the day or by the veil of the night, she said as she remembered all the times Shay would gushed about the different kinds of constellations and stars or just be lazy during the day and find some sort of shapes in the passing clouds. Well, if he isn't being a total nerd about history, that's what he usually do in those times. Those quiet and peaceful times is where she truly felt at peace, those lazy and uneventful time with the man she have decided to call her heart. Sothis hummed thoughtfully. She can tell that Sothis must have already know her innermost thoughts. Sothis, she called out to the goddess. Yes. Sothis asked. Can you forgive me for wanting to save Shay, for wanting to be selfish for once? She asked. I do, because I understand that feeling too well. It is a feeling I once felt with the man I love, Sothis said. She is about to say something when a voice interrupted her line of thought. Greetings, astute guests. A loud voice boomed all over the quiet room. Be careful, she said as she recognized the same presence she felt during the anniversary of the establishment of Gareg Mach. This man is Dash, she said. Dangerous, Rhea said. We've met, she simply stated with a soft sigh of indignation. What's with the sigh, little sei? Silas asked through some weird communication device somewhere. Aren't you happy to see me? He asked. I can't say I'm, Rhea said. How cold of you, little sei? Silas said in indignation. Oh, well, he said with a sigh. And she can almost picture the crazy man shaking his head. How about I give you a very warm welcome? Silas asked before she felt something activating inside the room. Well, I hope you enjoyed your reception, Silas said with a high-pitched giggle. Tada, you too, he said before the line was cut off. What was that, Abu Dash? She said before she sensed several presents running towards them. Is this what he is saying about reception? She asked as the celestial robe appeared around her and she withdraws her sword from the robe for preparation of battle. Rhea readied herself for battle just as several beasts come into their line of sight. What are those? She asked as she observed the misfigured beast before her. Oh, how rude of me to not introduce your escorts for tonight, Silas said with an amused laugh. This here is the prototype Snow 311. He said, a beast made from a synthetic material to imitate real living animals. Silas said, alas, they are no more than an imitation, therefore, failures for the experiment, and you are here to dispose of the failures or die trying, he said. It's only a matter on who will be the disposer and the disposee. Silas said with a giggle. Which is which? Oh, the intricacies, the intrigues, the curiosities. I can't hardly contain myself. All this excitement might make me implode. Silas boomed. Still a loony bin, Rhea said as she tried to analyze their situation. Rhea, look out! She exclaimed before she pushed her grandmother out of the way as the giant deformed beast's mighty and deformed hand made contact with the marble floor where Rhea was standing. Out of the way! She shouted as white flames swirl around her blade before she swing it and effectively cuts at least 5 of the beast in half. She almost sighed in relief when an additional 5 beasts joined the fray. Did I mention that there is more to the party? Silas asked in amusement. Damn it, Rhea muttered under her breath as she took out her axe from the beast's skull before she slides to the right as the beast threw a punch towards her before she jumped and chopped the beast's arm off, making it cry before it was silenced by several wired chopping it in 5 different pieces. There is no end to them. She said as she throw her axe towards the next beast as she run towards it while she grabs a smaller one on the head before she slammed it to the floor. crushing its skull underhand before she jumped up and slammed on another creature's chest, effectively kicking the beast down in a sense before she yanked her axe from it and slamming it down repeatedly until she managed to slice open its chest. Rhea roared as she brought her axe on the beast's heart, ending its life on Earth. She, on the other hand, have just finished burning her 15th creature before she felt something activating again. What? Now? She muttered. Be on your guard, child, Rhea said as she stood by her side. Oh, right, Silas said. I forgot to throw a bone towards my creation, he said. Make it fair for them, he said before she felt the flow of the power shift. What the, she said as she felt Suthi's power draining from her. How do you like it, Your Grace? Silas asked in amusement, introducing the XQA2000. A machine that will make any Nabatean power go bye-bye, as long as it is up and running, brought to you by the massive amount of powers flowing through Okama Mountains. Silas said. Enjoy, he said. Suthi's, she called out, making sure that Suthi's is still with her. I'm still here, but I'm afraid that the flow of my power cannot flow inside you as it normally would no matter how hard I try, Suthi's said. And how about her physical well-being? Rhea asked worriedly. She knows that the only thing that is keeping her alive is her mother's power. She is quite all right, Suthi's said. As long as I'm here, Byleth will keep on living, no worries, Siros, she said. Right, Rhea said with a nod before she heard her breath a sigh of relief. That's a wonderful news, she said. Anyway, we have to find a way to destroy whatever that machine is, she said as she looked around only to find no sign of the said machine. Well, we better do something rather than be sitting ducks here, Rhea said as she rolled out of the way. I'm thinking, she said as she ducked under the beast's swinging arms. Damn it, she said as she gradually felt her sword getting heavier. The machine is draining my strength too, she exclaimed as she saw Rhea struggling to be as fast as she usually is. If we are being affected then, Rhea said in horror at the implications. That's right, Silas said. With the release of a massive amount of power from Epiman's core and never-ending flow of it into the abyss, it is possible to create an anti-crest counter by enabling it by means of feeding too much power to the body to the point that the flow of the crest's powers can't recognize which is which anymore, he explained. It's as though the crest recognized everything around it as normal and thus, momentarily removing the crest as long as this machine is working. Silas announced. He may be a loon, but he is a brilliant loon, Suthi's said in amazement. This is hardly the time to be impressed, she exclaimed as she tried to feel if the crest of Siros will activate when she performed a combat art, but to no avail. It's really not working, she exclaimed as her blade skewered the creature's heart, having a hard time doing it too since the skin is too flabby and she doesn't have her usual brute strength to skewer it with ease. Wait, she muttered as she realized something. Silas laughed in a high-pitched laugh. Seems like that pretty little head of yours is not as empty as I thought it is, he said. What are you doing? Rhea asked as she too came into a realization. Yes, Silas said, though, the hero's relics are mere imitation of the real things, but it is enough to carry the same exact power of the real thing, he said, and if wielded by a non-crested human, Silas said as she can picture a grin slowly appearing on the madman's face. What is happening? Lysynthia muttered as her hair turned back into a honey brown color. I can't feel my crest, Linhard said. I can't feel the crest of Gloucester, Lysynthia said, but I can still feel the crest of Karen, she said as she noticed that her original crest is still in the works. Lysynthia, Linhard called out. What? Lysynthia asked as she is on her guard. I think I may have found out how to remove your second crest, Linhard said. I hope Professor Hanneman is taking notes, he said. Well, isn't that a great news, Lysynthia said as she looked forward, noticing that this effect is not limited to them but on the enemy's forces too. But we can talk about it after the battle, Lysynthia said urgently. Right, Linhard said. Right now, We focus, he said before he noticed that Lysynthia was looking at something. Hey, what's wrong? Linhard asked. Something is happening with the enemies, Lysynthia said. You see, Silas said, a sacred weapon forged by the master smith and his apprentice can be used by someone with a crest or not without consequences, but a hero's relics that was forged to be the embodiment of conquest, destruction, and everything chaotic by that demmed Thales of Miletus and his band of pathetic thugs, he said before he chuckled. Someone without its particular crest cannot unleash its destructive potential, while a sacred weapon can be used by anyone. And if someone wield a relic without a crest, Silas said before he laughed in delight, well, you already know, he said darkly. Annette parried the imitation of Crusher with her wooden scepter as Dominic interrupted her spell. What do you think you are doing, young lady? Dominic asked with a grin as he keeps pushing her down with his own strength before an arrow whizzed past his nose, making him loosen the weight on her. Annette pushed Dominic back before she spun her scepter to completely shake Dominic off her, but not too far for her to bind him. As soon as she finished spinning the scepter, she slammed it on the ground. The ground trembled under her feet before thick wooden vines sprout out of the ground as flowers and grass bloomed at her feet. Dominic swung Crusher to fend off vines after vines while he dodged the ones he missed. A giant flower sprout out of the ground and started shooting its razor-sharp ferrules, making Dominic to perform several somersaults in the air as means to avoid it before another arrow whizzed past his ear, missing it by a few centimeters as he flew towards his own descendant. Vines shot out from below him, effectively knocking his wyvern to crash land on the ground. Dominic falls off his wyvern upon landing, a vine wrapped themselves around him. That all you got? Dominic asked as Annette with a chuckle before Annette felt a strange tingle in the air as the crest of Dominic flashed brightly before her eyes before it abruptly disappeared. What happened? Dominic muttered in confusion. Annette is equally puzzled as she felt that she no longer cannot sense her crest anymore. Annette Ash asked as he went in front of Annette to protect her if her own ancestor managed to break free from the vines that binds him. I'm fine, Annette said as she gave Ash an assuring smile. It's just that, she said. What? Ash asked fearfully as he thought of all the things that might ail her. I can't feel my crest, Annette said. You can't feel it? Ash asked in surprise. Is that possible? He asked. I don't think so, Annette said. At least, I don't think it's possible to disable a crest like this, she said as she looked up and saw the gaping void in the sky as a steady stream of purple and azure light flows endlessly into the void before she saw tiny specks of those same light being released from the floating continent. Ash is about to say something when he heard a low growl from the man before them. Ash, Annette called out as her eyes widened as flashes of memories from when the Lance of Ruin was stolen from House Gautier. Ash gritted his teeth as the man was swallowed by black and red tar of sort. You are going to sacrifice your own comrade? She exclaimed. Silas merely chuckled. Comrade is such an intimate term to describe to those bumbling and aimless fools, he said. Call it more of a pawn, a stepping stone for us to reach our goals, Silas said. She can feel a cold shiver down her spine as Silas giggled madly. These people, even towards their fellow countrymen. That's how they always operated, child, Rhea said. Reformer is an organization of extremities. You either pay for your soul for making a deal with the devil or commit yourself to the cause of the devil, she said. Now, don't go trying to gain the high ground on me, little sei, Silas said. You are not exactly a saint yourself. Remember how you used Wilhelm and his feelings towards you? How you never repay the simple request he asked of you? Silas asked. I brought him his crown and his throne, Rhea said. I made him emperor of all Fodlan. She exclaimed. Yes, Silas said. You did, he said. But does he truly wanted the riches, the crown, the vast lands you have given him? No. He wanted you more than anything. Instead, you closed your heart to everyone after you lost your parents, your home, and your lover, leaving Wilhelm to suffer the maddening and suffocating pain of unrequited love, all the while wishing his wife was you, Silas said with a giggle. Did you ever think about how every night, every time he bedded his wife, he thought of you? He asked. He have everything, I gave him everything, Rhea said. I treated him as my friend and my ally. She said, I was still grieving my losses, I never stopped loving that man, and Wilhelm understood that. She said. Did he now? Silas asked. Well, the past is the past, and pray that your granddaughter never mirrored your fate, he said. Rhea, we need to focus and find a way to disable the machine, she said as she ignored that snide comment while she dodged another attack from those beasts. But where can we find it? Rhea asked as she rolled out of the attack. She said as she tried to pinpoint the location of the device. I don't know, she said as frustration welled up in her chest. She don't know how to get out of this situation. Chapter 84, Into Alquami. Seath somersaulted as he dodged a giant ball of fire from Heracles while he charged towards the man. The power of his crest have disappeared, but it is of no major consequences. He is trained not to rely on the power of his crest anyway, but he found himself having a hard time keeping up with Heracles without the extra power his crest have provided. Now, that just takes my fun, Heracles said with a sigh as he side float Seath. Well, he said as he charged after Seath, for the sake of our goal, we must take fun from the equation time and time again, he muttered as Seath parried his spear. Seath gritted his teeth as Heracles begun overpowering him. Heracles grinned in a sadistic pleasure as he keeps pushing the spear of Assel down before a light magic fired towards him, making him push Seath a few meters away from him before he flew up to avoid the attack. He barely avoided the magic before another comes his way, hitting him with it. Flame! Seath called out as Flame fell to the ground. She must have jumped out when he is in a deadlock with Heracles. Heracles emerged from the smoke and immediately come after Flame. No, Flame! Seath said as he urged his wyvern to fly faster towards Flame and Heracles. Flame parried Heracles' spear before she threw a blow of her own, only to be parried by Heracles. Back and forth they went, sparks flew around as the sound of metal against metal resounded in the sky as the two is locked in a dangerous waltz of death in the sky. Heracles brought his fist up as a dark magic begun forming in it. Flame mimicked his movement and a light magic started forming around her fist. As the two magic met with another, explosion of both light and dark magic can be seen in the sky before it formed a thick cloud of smoke, hiding the two fighters from sight. The fear that Seath felt at that moment intensified as he no longer can see his precious little girl, nor was he able to make sure that Flame is alright. Flame emerged from the smoke as she was hit by Heracles, and it seems like she is blocking whatever Heracles' attack is, making her come barreling down to earth in a rapid pace. Heracles emerged from the smoke, spear at the ready. Flame kept her guard up as Heracles hit her, making the speed of her fall even more rapid before Heracles charges towards her, his arm at the ready to throw his spear. Heracles infused the spear with his magic before he threw it towards Flame. The spear come barreling down towards her, like a meteor covered in a dark and oppressive aura as it come towards her, ready to claim her life. Flame closed her eyes as she prepared for the painful and hopefully quick death. A familiar voice roared from the distance as a miasma hit the spear, taking it off course. You started to have fun without me? The familiar voice asked as Flame felt herself landing on someone wearing an armor. Now, that just breaks my heart, bastard, the person holding her said. Knew you would come back for the party, Heracles said with a chuckle as his spear materialized in his hand. Beautiful slaughterer, Valerie Helena Regnus, he said with a wide and bloodthirsty grin. Well, now, Valerie said with a sigh. I turned my eyes away for a moment and the city in shambles, she said as she steadied Flame before infusing her with her power. You okay, Seathlin? Valerie asked as Seath flew beside her. Auntie Flame said in greeting. We thought you already left Gareg Mach, Seath said as Valerie helped Flame on the back of the wyvern. Well, I just happened to feel a massive amount of power flowing here, that an alquam floating above the monastery, Valerie said. How can a girl resist? She said with a shrug of her shoulders. Definitely got worried, Seath. And Flame thought blankly. Why can't you just be honest, big sister? Seath thought. Why act like that? You are too old to act like that, Auntie Flame thought. Wait, Valerie. Said, you two are just thinking of something rude, aren't you? She said. Not necessarily, Seath said as he looked away. Flane simply whistled. I'll deal with you two later, Valerie said as she took her attention towards the top of the tower. It seems like this a massive jamming spell, she said as she started to contact Ignatz and Raphael. Where the hell have you been? Raphael shouted. That's a nice welcome, Valerie muttered. Can you please search for the source of this horrific contraption in Alquam's layout? She asked. Alquam? Ignatz asked. The big floating continent projected on Ethra, Valerie said. Got it. Ignatz said. Valerie dodged Heracle's attack before she parried it with her halberd. At the top, the one that is releasing the power. Raphael said. All right. Valerie said as she sent a flurry of rapid attacks towards Heracle's. I'm on it. She said before she flew towards the tower that is releasing the power flow after she pushed the older man away from her. Seath intercepted Heracles to him. Your opponent is me, metamorphic slaughterer. Seath said. Heracles sneered. I have no need for a weakling like you, Sikal. He said as he pushed Seath back. Seath parried Heracles' attack before he sends another on his way. A swirl of miasma spell wrapped around Heracles' lance before he jabbed to him, scraping the spear of Assel by an inch, making the tip of the miasma drill scrap Seath's cheek before Flame let out a seraphim spell directly to Heracles' face. Clouds of smoke can be seen from the distance before Seath flew up. Too weak. Heracles said as he come out of the smoke with his lance at the ready. Seath blocked the attack. Disappointing, Sikal, Heracles said with a grin. Meanwhile, Valerie is chanting a spell as she flew towards the sprinkler-like device, and after she is done chanting, she fired a flurry of dark arrows towards the device, instantly destroying it and effectively stopping the function of the machine. But damage have been, the revived 10 elites saved for Bladdid who have let go of his Ariathar earlier, and Nemesis who have abandoned the imitation of the sword of the Creator, have been turned into a beast and is now wreaking havoc throughout the battlefield without discrimination of who is the foe and who is the enemy. You hearing me, midget? Valerie asked through their communications. I thought you left, she said with a smile as she felt her powers coming back. I turned my eyes off the damn place for a second or two and you guys already made a mess of things. You're welcome, Valerie said. Maybe tell me the summary of what happened. Valerie said. Long story short, Refermer took Shay and we are rescuing him, she said. How much trouble is that boyfriend of yours have become, midget? Valerie asked with a chuckle. Oh, well, I might as well have fun while I'm at it. Good luck, midget. Valerie said before she cut their chats off. She can feel her powers flowing through her veins again as she raised the sword of Ceros, white flames swirling around the blade before it formed into a chain made of fire. She swung her sword as fast as she can around her enemies, instantly cutting and burning them into crispy, disgusting pieces. You imagined the sword of the Creator, huh? Suthes said in amusement. Well, it's chain form that is, but hey, it worked, she said with a grin towards the pendant around her neck. This is why we can't have nice things, Celis said with a sigh. She and Rhea ignored the madman and run out the room and towards the grand hall of Alquam. Aphrodite grinned as she stood up. I guess, she said as her purple eyes lights up in excitement. My turn have come, she said as she walks towards the door to greet her guest, her hips swaying as she walks towards the great door of the waiting room. Child, Rhea said as they made haste to reach the upper level of Alquam. Before we go, I shall hear your decision, she said. What would you do with the container? Rhea asked. My answer, she said as the door opened, revealing a stunningly gorgeous woman in the garb of a noblewoman from when Nabatea and Agartha still existed and still stood strong. 2 against 1, huh? The woman said in amusement. Hardly fair if you ask me, she said as she disappeared and appeared behind Rhea. But it is what makes this all the fun, the woman said. Aphrodite, Rhea said through gritted teeth as she blocked the dagger only for it to slide across her gauntlet before she swung her axe. Aphrodite flipped through the air, using the blunt side of Rhea's axe to propel herself in the air before she swung her knife towards Rhea's throat only for Rhea to block the knife with her gauntlet-clad wrist. Sparks fly as the dagger drags along the metallic gauntlet before Aphrodite landed on her feet. Aphrodite whistled in amazement at Rhea's quick reflexes before dashing towards her. "My answer remained unchanged, Rhea," she said as she blocked Aphrodite's knife and pushing it upward before she swung her sword only for Aphrodite to block her attack. "He is a part of me, and if he is gone then, I won't be myself no longer," she said. Rhea sighed as she dashed to intercept Aphrodite's. Aphrodite's knife and Rhea's axe meet and clashed. "Then, go and rescue him," Rhea said as she pushed Aphrodite away from her. She nods and runs towards where Shay is. "Oh, how boring," Aphrodite said with sigh. "Here I was getting my hopes up that I can finally see what is the hype about with the Archbishop," she said. "Apologies for not being enough, but whether you like it or not, I'm your opponent, Aphrodite," Rhea said. "Not even complaining," Aphrodite said before a grin slowly appeared on her face. "Are you sure that can fight well?" Rhea asked as both women circled each other. "Whatever do you mean, little sei?" Aphrodite asked as she lazily spun her knife. "You have been blind for 3 millennia now," Rhea said. "And?" Aphrodite asked. "I don't see the problem," she said with a giggle. "Do you know why I'm also called the Frozen Viper?" Aphrodite asked as the room grew colder and darker. Aphrodite disappeared into the darkness. Rhea is on her guard as the temperature dropped and all lights seems to be sucked from the room. Rhea barely dodged the dagger aimed on her head. "Because I can see through the dark, I can see you," Aphrodite said as Rhea hit her knife before she retreated into the darkness. "I strike fear into the heart, and," she said as she hit Rhea on her side, "I carved pain into the heart," she said as she parried Rhea's axe before she retreated into the darkness once more. "I make them remember, what is fear without pain? What is pain without fear?" Aphrodite asked as her knife emerged from the shadow. Rhea leaned back to dodge the knife, only to find Aphrodite above her, her knife in hand and ready to strike her heart. Rhea performed a backflip in order to avoid the knife from piercing her heart. "Nothing," Aphrodite said as her knife met with the marble floor of Alquam. As soon as Rhea managed to gain her footing from the flip, she sent the wires from her gauntlet towards Aphrodite. Aphrodite jumped as the wires come at either sides of her, from the side and from below and above. She spun in the air as the wires scraped her just barely before she threw her knife towards Rhea just as she managed to correct her body and before she landed on her hand and knee. Rhea blocked the dagger in time with her axe only for Aphrodite throw a punch towards her side which she intercepted with her fist before she saw Aphrodite jab her dagger towards her chest which she quickly parried with her axe after she pushed the hand she is holding away. "Not bad, little sei," Aphrodite said with a grin as their blades locked at each other. She has entered the room where she can feel Shay is. As soon as the door opened she can see a girl around her and Shay's age kneeling, praying before the tank of liquid where she can see dark-haired man floating in it, asleep and bare as the day he was born. "Is that twerp?" Suthies muttered. She nods in certainty, even if his hair color changes, she will never mistake his face. "So, Hestiathades," Suthies said. The woman seems to stop praying and face her, purple eyes boring holes into her soul as she looked at her coldly and harshly. She pointed her sword towards Hestiathades. "I'm here to take him back," she said. Hestiathades narrowed her eyes as she summoned her staff. Chapter 85, A Peaceful World 2. It's been a year since he joined with the Knight of Ceros, having been recommended by Captain Gerald himself and was favored by Byleth and was made finalized by Archbishop Citrai. He is easily the target of many rumors, usually surrounding how him and Byleth are lovers and that Byleth just made him a knight to make an excuse why she usually visits his village monthly which turns into weekly. Frankly, he doesn't know why the people in his village and the people in the monastery thought that they are more than friends. they just two people who happened to get closer during Byleth's and Geralt's excursion and nothing more. Hey, what are you spacing out for, Runt? Geralt asked as he sat down beside him. He was suddenly brought out of his reverie at the sound of his teacher's voice. What the hell are you thinking now, Runt? Geralt asked as he took a swig of his flask. Just things, he said as looked at the sky. Lately, he have a feeling around Byleth, something about. Before he can finish that thought, he can feel a wave of pain surging in his head and he groaned. You okay, Runt? Geralt asked. Just the usual, headaches, he said as he holds his head in order to at least relieve the pain. Geralt extends his alcohol flask towards him. Here, he said. Are we allowed to drink on the job, Captain? He asked as he looked at the silver canteen. My wife have no problem with it, Geralt said. And you wondered why I'm your wife's and your daughter's favorite knight, he said with a laugh. Well, my daughter is thinking 7 ways on how you can plow her at the same time thinking a name for all of your 9 future children, and Citrai is already planning the wedding and eager to make you her son-in-law, Geralt said with a shrug. They do not, he said as he feel himself blushing. Trust me, Runt, Geralt said. Byleth do, and Citrai is already halfway in planning your wedding and she have first claim on your firstborn's name, he said. That's a nice joke, Captain, he said. Not joking, Geralt said as he took another swig of his drink. If it's any, I would have like it if you did become my in-law, he said. He just laughed at that. You are drunker than I thought you are, Captain, he said as he chuckled softly. Being serious here, Runt, Geralt said. And why is that? He asked. You took care of my girl, Geralt said. Treat her with the utmost respect and gentleness and never pushed your boundaries, he said. In my opinion, you are good apple, Geralt said. Caleb, he said. A surge of pain appeared in his head again and he almost blacked out. That name doesn't sound right to him, even though it's his name. Why does he feel like it belongs to someone else? Runt, Geralt called out. And the headache subsided. Yes, Captain, he asked as he took deep breath. You okay? Geralt asked. You are not coming down with something now, are you? He asked gently. He shook his head. I am fine now, he stammered. I think we should be heading back now, Geralt said. I'm fine, Captain, he said, trying to stand on his feet. We have to finish this patrol and dash, he said before he stumbled on his feet. Nope, Geralt said as he lifted him off his feet. We are going back to the monastery and that is final, he said as he carried him to his horse. Or my girl and my wife would kill me if something were to happen to you, Geralt said. Geez, Manuela said as she handed him a herbal tea. You are overworking yourself too much, Caleb, she said. He looked at the floor as he once again felt uncomfortable with what they are calling him. Why does his own name makes him so uncomfortable? It's almost like he was taken out of his reverie as he heard the door to the infirmary opened. Oh, Manuela said with a smile. If it isn't our young lady, she said with a giggle. Here to visit Sir Caleb, Byleth? Manuela asked. Byleth giggled at Manuela's remark. I was merely worried, she said before she turned to him. Indigo eyes are tinted with worry. You are working too hard lately, she said as she put her hand on his cheek. Something about the warmth of her hands made his chest constrict in pain and he can't even put a finger on it. He gently swatted Byleth's hand away from him and he looked away. I am fine, he said as he tried to get on his feet only to wobble on it. Careful now, Caleb, Byleth said as she supported him. Don't push yourself too hard, she said as she guided him sit back down on the infirmary bed. He said before he took a deep breath in order to take this pain in his head. I'll be fine, don't worry, he said as he finds himself unable to even mutter her name. He knows her but his tongue is unable to even mutter it, the name that is so dear to him. Byleth sighed at that. You are being too difficult, you know. She said as she put her hand on his forehead. You have been pushing yourself too hard and you are not even getting enough rest, Byleth said as she caressed the bag under his eye. He said as he trailed off, and Byleth keeps getting out of his focus. One moment she is wearing the vestments of a priestess and the next she have green hair and wearing the attire of the archbishop. Caleb? Byleth asked. I am fine, he said as the world focused around him again. Byleth frowned at that. Don't push yourself, she said. You have been working a lot these days, Byleth said in concern. When was the last time you took a break? She asked. Just an hour ago with your father, he said. Offered me a drink on the job, he said. Byleth laughed at that. Nothing new there, she said as she slapped his back lightly. Why don't you give in and just indulge the moody old gruff for once? Byleth asked. Is that any way to speak to one of your mother's knights? He asked with a raised eyebrow. To be fair, he is an old gruff, a very very moody old gruff, Byleth said. But you still love the old gruff, right? He said. And so do you, Byleth said. That I do, he said as he laid down on the infirmary bed. Say, Caleb, Byleth said. He hummed in response as he let his eyes close. Are you free this afternoon? Byleth asked. He said as he opened one eye. Why? He asked. Well, Byleth said as she averted her eyes. I was thinking of going to town alone, and well, Mother insists on taking one of the knights as one of my bodyguard, she said. He chuckled. You needing a bodyguard, milady? He asked as he sat up. Byleth seems annoyed by that. You are the strongest fighter in the lands and you expect me to believe otherwise? He asked. Byleth let out a huff and crossed her arms in annoyance. You are no gentleman, she muttered. Thank you for the compliment, he said as he laid back down before he felt a pillow hitting his face. Moron, Byleth said before she huffed off somewhere. He took off the pillow from his face and looked at Manuela, who is busy writing on the logbook. What was that about? He asked. You are moron, Manuela said. Not you too, he exclaimed. It's your funeral, Manuela said. Whose side are you on anyway? He exclaimed. Hey, I love both you and Byleth and sometimes I have to side on who's right here, Manuela said. But she just called me a moron without any reason, he muttered with a pout. Maybe you deserve it, Manuela said. I was just complimenting her, he stated. Manuela raised an eyebrow. That's a compliment? She asked. Well, yes, he said. I mean, who wouldn't compliment her? She is strong, she is amazing and she can do anything, he said enthusiastically, and not only that, she is a very very stunning woman, he said looking away as he felt his cheeks heat up as he realized what he just said. Please, don't tell her that, he pleaded as he saw Manuela grinning. No promises, boy, Manuela said with a hum of amusement. Professor, he exclaimed. Just repeat what you tell me to her already, Manuela said. No way, he exclaimed. And why not? Manuela asked as she put an emphasis on the why not. He mumbled under his breath. Speak up, Manuela said impatiently. It's embarrassing and she might think that I'm a creep, he shouted as he feels his face on fire. Manuela let out a very, very long sigh. What's with the sigh? He asked. Nothing, Manuela said as she went back into writing into the logbook. Don't ignore me, he exclaimed. Citri hit him with the book of Ceros. Moron, she said. Not you too, your grace, he said. Go and escort my daughter to town, you big goof. Citrai commanded. You do know that your daughter is stronger than me, right? He asked the archbishop. Such cheek, Citrai said with an affectionate giggle before pinching his cheek. Just go. She said weirdly excited. You are acting weird again, Your Grace, he said in a deadpan voice with a matching deadpan look. Hush. Citrai said. Go on a day to town with my daughter. That is an order. Citrai said. He scratched his head and wondered how the church managed to stay afloat with such an eccentric archbishop. So, Byleth said as they looked through the stalls, my mother literally Bible thump you, huh? She asked. To submission, yes, he said with a nod. Can't say you didn't deserve it though, Byleth said. Why does everyone keep saying that? He asked. Byleth looked at one of the stalls. No reason, she said. Everyone keeps saying that, he mumbled under his breath as he scratched his head. Byleth simply giggled. What's so funny? He asked as he raised an eyebrow towards her. Nothing, Byleth said as she walked away. As she continued to giggle softly, nothing at all, she said. That giggle doesn't sound like nothing, he said. Whatever you say, Byleth said with a giggle. Come on, he said as he walks beside the dark teal-haired woman. What do you find so amusing with my predicament? He pestered. Nothing, Byleth said. Come on, tell me, he said as he nudged her softly. No way. Byleth said as she looked away from him. Wait, he said as he felt a smug smile appearing on his face. Are you blushing? He asked. No. Byleth said with huff. You are. He said excitedly. What? Does your mother literally Bible thumping me and you calling me a moron have some sort of a connection to one another? He asked. Byleth nudged him on the ribs. Ow, he said with a chuckle. I think you broke a rib, he said. Byleth gave him a look. Yep, 2 ribs, he said as he feigned a pained expression. I'm sure you can handle a broken ribs and more, Byleth said. How can you? He so cruel? He asked. Is that any way for a member of the church to act? He asked. Hey, to be fair, Byleth said as she held her hands in surrender. You deserved it, she said. For being a moron? He asked. For being a moron, Byleth said with a nod of affirmation. A comfortable silence enveloped the two of them as they navigate through the crowded street. Something about this felt familiar, something about walking side by side with her put him at ease. Hey, look. Come on. Buy it for me, twerp. Huh? Whose voice was that? It sounds like her voice, but there is something in her voice, something different, something that told him that for the very first time in her life, she is seeing the world in a new life. Caleb, Byleth called out. That name felt wrong. His head hurts. Come, Byleth said as she grabbed his hand. I have something to show you, she said as she guided him to the outskirt of town. The feeling of comforting and warm hand smaller than his own holding his, feels like he have found his home. He found the place where his heart knows it has finally found a hearth where it felt safe and warm. She smiled towards him as she drags him in the crowded street as they escape their busy lives in the monastery life. That smile, that enchantingly beautiful smile of hers, made his heart afraid of hoping that she will stay, that death won't take her away from him. The smile that made him want to change himself for her, to protect her, to be worthy of her. He looked at the woman in front of him, the woman whose name he can't even mutter. No. He knows her, and she is the most important living person to him, his. He laughed as Byleth continued leading him. And where do you think you are taking me? He asked. Byleth giggled. You'll see, she said as she leads him up a hill. And we are just in time for it too, she said excitedly. He smiled as he heard the excitement in her voice, but his heart felt pain. To see her smile like this, undulated by death and bloodshed, a smile that have known only the joy of living and being herself without the world needing her to change it, without the very burden of the world upon her shoulders. How beautiful, how utterly heartbreaking. He let a wistful smile paint his lips as he stared at her indigo eyes, so full of life, full of happiness. "Here we are," Byleth said happily as they reached the top of the hill. "This is what I want to show you," she said. His eyes widened as he saw the scenery before him. The fields upon fields of Fionas of every color have been dyed in a crimson glow of the setting sun, making the fields looks like as though it was lit into the gentlest of ambers, lit and dangerous but still unprovoked by the gust of winds, making it stay in its undisturbed states, still gentle and unsullied by anger or burden the winds have carried. The grass swayed in the gentle breeze of the lukewarm winds of summer and fall. The scene is nothing special, yet it brought him a sense of peace and tranquility. Such a beautiful world this is. Cruel and unforgiving in its state of never-ending strife and suffering, yet still as gentle and kind as to give solace to the souls that needed its comforting embrace. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Byleth asked as the winds gently play with her dark teal hair. Oh, how he envied the winds. So carefree and confident to reach out and play the hair of such a beautiful maiden such as her. He wished for the wind's confidence. And he wished its freedom, not for him but for her. He looked at her and his breath was caught in his throat and his heart is set aflutter. Byleth's indigo eyes shine as she smiled from the bottom of her heart, the light of the setting sun only intensifying the beauty of those gem-like eyes of hers, enthralling him, captivating him. Yet, she does not know the power she holds over him. He is her captive, a slave to his heart and her servant, yet she doesn't know her hold on him. "Yes," he said. He stared into those indigo hues of hers, mesmerized and enchanted by their otherworldly beauty. "It is," he said softly, his voice merely a whisper to her and not even the winds and the purple and crimson sky can hear. Byleth's eyes softened. "Right," she said. "I found this when I wandered out of the monastery back when I was a child," Byleth said with an impish laugh. "I bet your parents was worried about you," he said with a soft chuckle. "The whole monastery more like it," Byleth said with a mischievous giggle. He smiled softly as he saw the hint of a childish mischief in her giggle. He reached up and touched her cheek. "What?" Byleth asked, startled by your sudden show of affection. He didn't say anything as he stared into those indigo eyes of hers, the same eyes that seems to look at him like he is her whole world, but this one is untarnished by war and loss. Byleth responded by wrapping her arms around you as the sun sets and the skies slowly darkened as she leaned closer to him. He closed his eyes and leaned down towards her before he stopped just a few inches from her lips. "What's wrong, Caleb?" Byleth asked. "Right. He knows. No matter how much he looked for it. This isn't her. The one he knows, know the pain of life, saw death in the battlefields, felt despair at some point in her life, felt emotions, meet new people, worked hard for the trust of the people, a hardened warrior, a strong woman that never let the world drag her down to the dirt and she always faced it head on. I'm sorry but, he said as he finally truly looked at her, I have to go back, I don't belong here, he said as reality crumbles around him. Such a peaceful world, but this isn't his world. Don't you want to live in this world? No. Didn't you desire to live in this peaceful world? He did, but what? He would rather live in a world full of strife. By Byleth's side as she took everything head on. He would rather be with the one he have grown to love these past and a half year, fighting by her side and supporting her as he watched her laugh, smile, be frustrated, be angry, and cry at times. There is nothing more enchanting than witnessing it all. See her every smile, hear her every laugh, endure endless teasing from her. The memory of Byleth shielding him from that spear came to mind. His eyes widened and one thought crossed his mind. He have to come back. He have to make sure she is all right. Reality crumbled around him. Shay, come back to me. He heard a glass shattered and he falls down to the ground, gasping and coughing for air. Check the description for the links to the author.